So over to Angela. With great pleasure, I'd like to introduce Angela Espinosa, legendary cybernetician, queen of cybernetics, as she is sometimes referred to.
Gosh, you are making me feel very shy, John, for goodness sake.
Not at all.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for being here. I'm very happy to be sharing this webinar with you. Today, the topic that I want to talk to you about is called, well, wait a minute, there is an echo. I think that someone needs to be muted. That's all right. I think that we are right now. Yeah. Okay, so the topic I want to talk to you today, I call it sustainable self-governance. And I want to reflect on what I call the early alarms from the COVID-19 pandemic. So to start with, I'm gonna be, the structure of the webinar is I'm gonna first very briefly introduce what John and me have been developing together that I call the viability and sustainability approach, and we focus on this idea on self-governance, and then I'm gonna be using this approach to reflect on the COVID-19 pandemic, and in what I call the early alarms that this pandemic is bringing us, from the individual to the family to the business and society and global levels. So a little bit of reflection on each one of these levels. And then basically this is an invitation for all of us, this community, to continue developing Stafford Beer's legacy, hopefully with even more innovative and useful and pragmatic approaches to sustainability and self-governance, so that we can jointly contribute to a better post-COVID society. Well, first of all, the usual awareness. I think that we are more than aware today that the impact we are having in the planet has been really dramatic. So we have these cartoons about the increasing CO2, total destruction of biodiversity, soil desertification, inequality raising, and now with the COVID and the still running until the current paradigm of economic growth, this really bad alliance between those that continue to pressure economic growth and the pandemic. And as a consequence, it becomes very clear that we are in a kind of suicidal attitude as a species, and we are in risk of really ruining the possibility, our own possibility of existing in this planet as a species. Obviously, the planet will survive. The only ones that may not survive is ourselves if we don't do something more serious about it. So, yes, coming. Who wants to talk?
Are we being recorded?
Yes, we are being recorded. Yes.
Because it doesn't show that it's being recorded. Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank
yes,
you.
And I'm not. I don't know if you're sharing your screen, because we're not seeing it.
You are not seeing my screen?
No, we're not seeing your screen.
Oh, thank you, Marta.
Yes, we were seeing your screen, your slides.
Okay.
Your slides, certainly.
Okay.
We're all seeing them, Martha.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, now we can see it.
Well, so you were seeing my screen, or you were not seeing my screen?
We were seeing it. We were seeing
right. Okay.
I was not, but now I'm seeing it. I don't know what happened. Okay, thank you.
All right. So this is a cartoon of Stafford. Well, all the nice illustrations are by Tom Walker Johnson, who is a very nice artist. And this all starts in a conversation I had with Stafford in Toronto the year before he passed away. He died, and I was at that point beginning to feel very excited about using the VSM to think about sustainability And I remember I was coming to England to do a postdoctoral study on sustainable development, on sustainability and viability. And I remember Stafford said to me, but you cannot talk about sustainable development. Sustainable development is an oxymoron because there is no development that can be continuous. You cannot continuously grow and grow and grow because this is not sustainable. And then I started thinking, okay, what really I want to focus my research is on understanding the idea of not only viability, but viability and sustainability. How can we be viable and still be be sustainable as an organization or a society? As Donella Meadows used to say, we need to accept our limits to growth. We cannot just grow, and destroy the planet while we grow. So the idea, we started developing this idea with John. Roger Harden helped us in one of the initial papers to clarify this idea of sustainability as viability without causing severance from the niche. So understanding that the niche is this part of the environment that we co-evolve with, how can we be viable without destroying our environment? Yeah. So now, I mean, these ideas, we started developing these ideas and we end up producing this book that the Imperial College invited us to write that we call a Complexity Approach to Sustainability Theory and Application. We are now in the second edition of the book, and in this book, we were trying to clarify many of the things that Stafford have done about sustainability. Of course, we were following the steps of the pioneers, including Raúl, Marcus, and other people that were pioneering these ideas also in the field of sustainability. And then we came up with this idea, and the whole book is trying to explore how do we become more viable and sustainable as individuals, organizations, and societies in general. And in that moment, we were trying to suggest a kind of visionary idea of how the society could improve by using these ideas in different levels. But then the COVID came in, and then with the COVID, many of the dreams that we had completely disappeared. And I mean, in this moment, we are really, the questions have shifted. And now we have even bigger challenges because now we have to find out how can we be viable and sustainable in the new context of the COVID-19 that has already transformed dramatically the society we live in. So coming back to Stafford and the way that he put it, if you remember in Stafford, in the viable systems model, we have an operation, the management, and the environment. And we talk about the niche, like that aspect of the environment we co-evolve with. And we can say that an individual, a business, or even a whole society can either make the right decisions to avoid co-evolving towards a catastrophic domain, or not making any decisions and end up in such a state of self-destruction, which seems more likely the kind of things that we are doing in general. Yeah. So my question is, COVID-19, can we see it as an early alarm to intentionally shift our trajectory? Do we still can collectively, intentionally, consciously shift the trajectory of evolution that we are in this moment? So that's the question that I've been exploring and want to share with you. So in the book, we started talking about this idea of recursive governance, that is the idea that obviously came originally from Stafford, that we can apply the same concept of viable system model from an individual to a whole nation or even to a whole planet. Any kind of organization we could analyze, we could reflect about its viability using the viable system model. And in theory, a viable and sustainable organization could be an organization that is self-organized, self-governed, have properly done checks and balances in terms of the ongoing transactions with its niche, with its socio-ecological niche, co-evolves with its niche, resulting in a homeostatic balance without severance to the niche, is adaptive and resilient, and contains and is contained in other viable and sustainable systems. Yeah. So if we think of this idea, if we try to see things in this idea, so one way that I can see that we can contribute in this moment is starting analyzing our relationships with ourselves, with our local environment, with our working environment and industrial environment, with society, with government, using these basic criteria of viability and sustainability. At the individual level, this is a picture that John has used very much in his teaching of the BSM, and I'm borrowing, like I have been borrowing for all these years, most of the drawings from John that are really exciting. In this one is just a representation from Leonardo da Vinci, and John always explains the way that an individual will relate with the niche in terms of the kind of activities that we do. We have a family, we have a garden, a bicycle, friends, books, computers, work, house, food, internet, shops, banks, and so on. So we have a normal life. And what has been happening with the COVID is that many of these activities that we took for granted have been questioned, or basically we haven't been able to do it anymore. Yeah.
Angela, can you just check my slide's still on the sustainable development one with the
right? Okay. So just recapping. Yeah. I was talking that but now I have some noise. Is that better, the noise? Yeah. Okay. So I was explaining that in our book with John, Complexity Approach to Sustainability, we were exploring an understanding of the viable system model from the point of view of viability and sustainability. And that the question in this presentation was to explore how can we become more viable and sustainable as individuals, organizations, and societies in the context of the COVID-19. Yeah. And I'm basically saying the COVID-19 has given us an algedonic signal about the viability of organizations, business, and societies. So what I want to explore is what can we understand, how can we understand and make sense of this situation. But now I'm in trouble again, because now I cannot move to the next slide. There is something. Oh yeah, okay. So I was saying that the idea of recursivity that Stafford explained in the viable system model allows us to see organizations from the individual to the whole nation, even the global level, as self-organized systems, self-governed. And the idea of a viable and sustainable organization is one that is self-organized, have checks and balances in ongoing transactions with the socio-ecological niche, and co-evolve with the niche, creating homeostatic balance with the niche, and become adaptive and resilient, and contains and is contained in other viable systems. So this idea of viability and sustainability, what I think that is very relevant to this topic is the idea of emerging consciousness, because viability and sustainability will only happen if there is an emerging consciousness that become global, that become massive, and between all of us we start really transforming the way that we experience our life individually and socially and in our works. I was sharing this picture of this is an individual with the different activities that an individual does, like having a family, a garden, a house, a computer, going to the movies, going in the car, having internet, and so on. And I was saying that many of these activities that we taken for granted in the past became completely transformed by the pandemic. So all of a sudden we cannot use the car. Many people cannot go to work. Thank God there is not so much traffic. No movies, no pubs, banking, the internet. Everything we can do in the internet we're doing, but many other things we are just not being able to do it. Yeah. So in a way, this massive social crisis is asking us, is forcing us to focus on what I will call the essential aspects for individual and social viability and sustainability. It's like a little bit going back in time, and in the past, people will concentrate on the basic things to survive. No, they need to eat. We need to eat, to have a home, to have a work, to keep healthy, to have access to basic services like water, energy, gas, oil, and to keep safe. So in a way, the pandemic has created a context in which the less we can do is to try to be able to focus on these essential aspects for sustainability. Now, in the lockdown, we are making some sustainability choices. Like, for instance, those of us that have the immense privilege to have a garden, no, to work from home, to educate our children from home, then we are deciding to do that: homeschooling, green gardening, online working, and online socializing, online learning, online sharing, like we are doing in this very moment. Yeah. Now, obviously, there are some unexpected results, like the improvement in quality of life, in wildlife, in air quality, and some slight improvement regarding the rate of of change towards climate change. Now, this is borrowing a little bit from both Elena's work and Mark Johnson's work, thinking on the individual as a viable system. Yeah, and I just map model an individual, thinking on the basic activities, like the primary activities that each one of us has to do to survive. Yeah, and that includes, of course, work, learning, family, having some fun, taking personal care and health, developing a relationship, spiritual and with nature, no, and some community engagement. And we could perfectly, in the niche here, again, I'm putting just question marks in some of the issues that have changed in an individual life. And we could use the VSM also to reflect about the kind of things that we can do to self-manage ourselves, to self-govern ourselves, to become more conscious of our limitations, our constraints, and our possibilities. Yeah. So issues like self-balancing, system 2, self-management, system 3, self-development, system 4, and preserving our identity and developing new identities, like system 5. So at that level, let's say there are some examples that I'm not going to stop, of ways in which we can interpret our personal life in this moment, and just as a tool for reflection, for self-reflection. Now, in terms of the context where we are, no, we are living in our family. We have a household, and as I was saying, some of us have the luxury to be in the countryside and have a green garden, or so. Issues like working from home, using electric bikes or cars to go to work, producing our own food, recycling, reforesting, using renewable energy, loving and caring for family members, plants and animals. Yeah, these kind of things, they have become more important than ever. I guess that many of us have a field experience of enjoying so much when you can go for a walk, when you can really enjoy the company of animals, when you can, the few times that we are allowed to socialize, when you can socialize even in outdoors with a few people. So in some ways, it has just made us aware of many things that we took for granted. We took for granted friends, we took for granted partying, being happy, shopping, traveling, and many of these things in this moment are not possible, even if they are becoming possible slowly. So at that level, let's say the reflection is, how can we really be more aware of the value of our choices? Yeah. In terms of business, it's clear that business have to develop resilience, and most business have been taken all of a sudden by surprise with enormous challenges. They have to readapt, they have to make a strategic transformations, self-transformations very quickly if they want to survive. Some businesses have not been able to survive, and not surprisingly, businesses that are not directly related with essential aspects of viability and sustainability. So businesses that are related with food, work, energy, transport, and so on may have survived. Many others, like a vanity business that are just selling things that are not fundamental for any people, just luxuries, many of them have collapsed, simply have collapsed. Yeah. In the last few years, I had the opportunity to work to apply this approach of viability and sustainability, both as a consultant with John and supervising PhD or master students. And there have been a couple of really nice surprises that I want to share with you. So this is one of the beautiful surprises. This was a project that we did recently with John, with one of my MBA students from Hull University called Vladimir Pop. He's the owner, he and his family are the owners of this group of 8 schools in Cluj in Romania. And Vladimir was really really loved the VSM and wanted to use it in his school. So he invited John and me to accompany them, to guide them, to coach them through a learning process on the VSM in their school. And that happened to be like the year before the pandemic. Of course, in those days, we didn't know there was coming a pandemic. So for a year, we worked with them in applying the VSM in these schools. And it was really interesting because when we arrived, this is like the recursive mapping of the schools, the 8 schools, the 5 kindergartens, 2 primary schools, and 1 high school. Yeah. And then we did the work, and we did self-transformation, and through workshops we were educating them, and they were sort of embedding the distinctions of the VSM and reflecting on the structure, and we managed to do really fundamental changes, basically to flatten the organization and to eliminate all sorts of issues that were deterring the performance of the school. There was a very centralized management, and the management was completely overloaded with variety. They were slow making decisions, and they had all sorts of breakdowns in communications with the parents. The climate of teachers, many teachers were not completely happy with the way things were going. And even if they were already the second best private school or the first one in Cluj and one of the best ones in Romania, and they were very successful, they were in the process of they wanted to grow because they had an enormous demand for places, and they have already bought some land, and they needed to restructure to be able to get ready for the expansion. So in those days, that's what we were doing. But the learning that they got through the process of the self-transformation was very important for them. And during the pandemic, many of the learnings that they have done and the readjustments in the structure proven to be fundamental, because they managed to reorganize very quickly, very fastly, to implement the new structure that they needed now to cope with the pandemic, to shift into online, to restructure finances, management of teachers, and so on, and all the management of students, and social distancing, and the whole thing that all the schools and universities have gone through in the last year. Yeah, this is a testimony from Vladimir Pop, and he says that basically this transformation helped them to deliver, to adjust their current organization to maintain quality, and it resulted in a much healthier organization with more flexibility, adaptability, autonomy, synergy, and a well-designed and updated structure. And during the pandemic, that managed to demonstrate that an amazing short span for reacting and adapting to the new situation, fast reorganization of the school to teach online and to introduce the new lockdown rules, having learned about the importance of feedback loops between different systems of the organization and their external environment, and being operating in a much more flexible structure, weighted heavily in dealing successfully with the changes that the pandemic implied. Yeah. So basically, they are very happy. We continue talking to them and relating to them. We haven't been able to travel and to see them, but let's say that it was a very timely time. So at that level, the examples of businesses around the world are enormous. I mean, we can see restaurants, airlines, hotels. I mean, all businesses have had to go through these transformations. So if we think about individuals, businesses, we can think about communities, how communities have had to transform themselves as well in this pandemic. And we can see that there are basic services in every community. If we again go and make an abstraction of what are the major activities of any community, of course there are dozens of major systems and organizations and networks operating in every community. But if we focus the analysis in those activities that are primary, that are basic for survival, we can come up with a relatively simple model of of mapping complexity in a community. I mean, we can think about basic services, health, work and social security, education, infrastructure, commerce and security, and we can, with the BSM, no, try to make a mapping and analysis of what changed, no, what was this massive variety change in the environment and how each one of them is responding, and what are the possibilities for viability and sustainability of each one of these sectors. Yeah, so things like basic services may continue being all right, but obviously there are sectors like health that have a huge impact and stress in this moment for the pandemic. There are issues like work and social security that also are having enormous impact for the amount of people that are workless, have not a job or no social security. Things like education, infrastructure, security have managed to survive. But those that managed to adapt quickly have managed to survive, and many businesses in the commercial sector have collapsed. No, so only some of them have survived. So the amount of lessons that we have, if we could really sit down and study with people and help people to understand, no, the issues, the big transformations that are going on, we will be really able to identify these early alarms, no, and make some reflection about the needs for self-transformation at the community level. What are issues that are not really basic and that have shifted during the pandemic, and is there any, let's say, possibility to help a systemic change in the right direction? Yeah. This is another example with another student of mine. This is in Colombia. His name is Carlos Duran. He did, I supervised his thesis, and he has a background in anthropology and an MSc in innovation, social innovation. And in the BSM module that John used to lead, and I'm now replacing John in this university in Colombia doing the BSM, he just was interacting with this community in Rosario Islands in the Colombian Caribbean. This is an Afro-Colombian community. These people, most of them live from ecotourism. This is one of the most important coral reefs reservoirs in Colombia and in the world. It's extremely beautiful. These islands are extremely beautiful. So most of the people work in either fishing, tourism, hotels, restaurants, crafts, and so on. Yeah. So they have problems of self-governance, but the Colombian constitution have allowed these communities to be owners of the territory and to develop their own self-governance capabilities. And with Carlos, we designed an intervention so that he was coaching the community to try to reflect on their current situation and how to improve their self-governance capabilities. So we did the usual thing that we normally do using the methodology. I call it the self-transformation methodology. And we did an analysis of the identity of this community. We did a recursive analysis, a BNS diagnosis, and we identify some urgent changes. In the diagnosis, for example, they find out things like the projects, the different community projects were quite informal. They had sporadic competition agreements and other kind of system 2 mechanisms, but they were, let's say, not completely effective. They had some internal regulations that haven't been completed and haven't been were not put into practice many times. There was not a clear model of operations or accountability. They didn't have a proper way of doing community planning. Most of the planning was more based on rumor, intuition, or conjecture. Yeah. And there was a poor participation in the assembly, even if they have an assembly that was democratic and included people representing each one of the systems one and each one of the families in the island. This family was very traditional, no? The elders, it had a board of directors and a legal representative, but it wasn't very functional. And actually, this assembly was doing like system 5 4 and 3 roles in some way, and there was still a lot of room for improvement. Yeah, during the process, they discovered that they made agreements about things that they could improve, like, for instance, promoting more what we call responsible autonomy to systems one, so giving them autonomy to act, but generating a bit more of accountability, reinforcing some of the cultural mechanisms for coexistence, like systems two that were there in their culture but could very well have been reinforced. Yeah, generating a project bank to manage synergies between the different activities in the island, developing annual strategic meetings, and improving the board structure with representatives of the systems one. So they started putting these things into practice, and Carlos Duran has been in touch with them recently, finding out what happened during the COVID in the last year. And again, a nice surprise to see that this community, thanks to the improved structure and organization that they had very recently to this project, they managed to reinvent themselves in a way, like, for instance, created a team, a health team, for daily registering and following up affected families and getting humanitarian aid from the Colombian government. They created a WhatsApp group with all family members in the community, and developed online agreements on proposals to protect the community against the COVID-19 transmission, like limiting the number of boat transports from Cartagena to the islands per week, restricting these transports exclusively to community members. Yeah, as the tourist economy was highly affected by the lockdown, they managed to collaborate so that fishery, agriculture, and bartering were jointly adopted by the island's families to adapt and survive. They didn't have more tourists, no, because of the lockdown, and they needed to reinvent themselves in a way that they will all survive. And they managed to reestablish some of the traditional ways of bartering and some of reinforce their cooperative mechanisms and governance mechanisms so that they could share. Yeah, and then some new young leadership emerged. No, so new young leaders come up and started really activating and motivating people. So, I mean, by the end, these islanders have done quite well during the pandemic. So another nice experience that show that we really can help, even at the level of a community, with these ideas just to give them ideas on how to, or to help them to find out their own ideas, no, on how they can better survive and become more sustainable. At the level of the industry sectors, no, let's take this example of the health sector that is the obvious, more sector that has been challenged by the pandemic. This is a study before the pandemic. This is a study, I took some ideas from students of mine in the MBA in Hull University, and some ideas also from David Copper, that is a doctor, medical doctor who has written and published a little bit about NHS and BSM. Yeah, in the study that in this picture that I managed to collate before the pandemic, you can see, well, first of all, the NHS is a amazingly complex organization, as you can know. I mean, it's like a more than £2 billion a year budget, more than 1 or 2 million people working at the national level in the NHS, no? And it's in NHS England, Wales, and Scotland, Northern Ireland, and each one of them, it has different regions, and each one of them have primary care, secondary care, community health, public health, and social care. And inside each one of them is all the GPs, the surgeries, the hospitals, and so on. To coordinate, these are hugely complex organization to make it, to be able to adapt very quickly to the new conditions and stresses and demands of the pandemic has been, as you can imagine, a huge challenge. So another really interesting experiment is how can we, help the NHS to understand itself and to find out which are the structural issues that are stopping them to more flexibly and more quickly adapt and being able to provide an quality service in the middle of the crisis. Yeah, these previous diagnoses, for instance, show already constraints that existed in the structure of the NHS before the pandemic. Like, for instance, very centralized strategy, so local levels were never very clear, timely enough about what was the strategy. Coordination between care providers was a bit difficult with aspects and issues with privatization of some services, yeah, favoring local supplies, like for instance PPA, not doing that, but lots of centralization in terms of suppliers, again big contracts to specific companies, but not using the power of localized supply, yeah, not agile enough in terms of responding to increased demands, lack of clarity in strategies, not enough real-time decisions, no, things like test and trace adoption took a lot of time. It's still in process after a year, yeah. And even if they have a lot of really nice systemic structures in place, not all of them work as they would expect, yeah. And they have these local emergency teams. Not all of them were being able to react fast, not because of problem with the people, because they have brilliant people, 100% committed. I mean, they are committing with their own lives to this situation, but because the structure not necessarily was allowing them, yeah. So at that level, I know that it's not only us, some of us. I know that Marcus, for instance, Marcus Schwaninger is working in Switzerland with the National Health Service, and he will be presenting us the opening webinar in the second semester, and he's going to be sharing with us his experience in Switzerland. Yeah, in this moment, John and me are beginning to explore the possibility of doing a more in-depth work with a whole hospital trust in trying to understand the COVID response, how they have managed to respond to the pandemic, and try to help them to be conscious of issues that are in their structure, in the way of organizing, that may be deterrents of agility, performance, and adaptability to be able to implement very quickly the new ways of organizing that the pandemic requires. So that's another field in which definitely I know that many of us are interested, and definitely we have a big contribution. We can have a big possibility of contributing. Yeah. So let's go now to the national level. We've talked about the individuals, communities, businesses, no, industry sectors. Let's think about the national level. I think that with the information that we have about the pandemic, we start with those of us with a cybernetic eye. We start always trying to find patterns. What are the patterns that are repeated in different contexts? What can we learn for failures and successes? It becomes very clear over the last year that there are some countries that have been great in dealing with the pandemic, and there are others that haven't been great. No. So the question that I think that is an interesting question from a research perspective is what are the failures? What can we learn from failures in the way of dealing for the pandemic at national levels? What are the successes? Yeah, and we can see some patterns. Like for example, of course, this is my personal opinion, and I may be wrong. I've only used documentary evidence from newspapers and medical reports. But I can see these patterns emerging. Like for instance, United States, United Kingdom, Russia, Brazil, who have been at the top of the COVID-19 infections. Yeah, all of them have similar patterns. Top-down leadership, the leaders that have underplayed the seriousness of the virus, dismissive of expert advice, no, and putting of their own political interests ahead people's head. Top-down controlling approaches, centralized strategy decisions and information, centralized PPA purchasing, which obviously opens room for corruption. Test and trace strategy delayed, no, very typical of all of these countries, based on reports. Successes, no, we see two very clear cases of successes like New Zealand and Cuba. Both of them are at the bottom of COVID-19 infections. Yeah, both of them share some patterns like early prevention systems, effective test, trace, isolate, and support strategies, massive communication with people, democratic leadership, and effective rapid response teams. Yeah, so if we map this in DSM terms, we can't learn about the structure of the national systems, the relationship between local providers, regional providers, and national providers, and we can find out that there are some aspects of the organization of the health systems that that we could improve. And improving these aspects of organization will save millions of lives. So again, it's another field that is open for research, and as I say, I'm aware that some of us in this community are already working in these things, and I think it's a very important contribution. In the book, in our book with John, we suggest what I call this framework for assessing self-governance, sustainable self-governance, and this is basically BSM criteria. Yeah, I just have classified it in these labels. No, co-evolution within each, autonomy and cohesion and recursive governance, and I put some criteria. And I've done this just with the intention of trying to provide a way of comparing between case studies. If you are analyzing the capabilities for self-governance between different case studies, if you can compare, yeah. In this frame, in this example, I'm just ticking the box saying yes, good or not that good, or doubtful how good it is, or definitely bad. Yeah. As again, this is not yet scientific research; it's just an example of what can be done. Yeah, and in this kind of comparison, you will see immediately that it is clear that countries that have been successful comply with BSM criteria in terms of self-governance. Okay? They have been much better in terms of, for instance, awareness of the COVID pandemic and tackling it early enough, communicating it effectively, identifying infected people, testing and tracing, real-time decision making, effectively responding to niche changes, effective self-governance, closing the loop, effective local response teams, effective conflict and crisis management, promoting synergies among local providers and suppliers, developing learning and adaptive capabilities, closure on health strategy implementation, linking local and global governance and decisions. So again, this is just a proposal, but I guess that if we manage to really think through, do serious analysis, compare, perhaps we can start collectively learning about what are good, better conditions to self-organize and to respond to the pandemic. And let's finish thinking about the global level. Yes, at the global level, obviously we have a huge gap. No, can we really talk about global health self-governance? Yeah. Well, if you do just a very rapid analysis of the global viability and sustainability structures, it looks very clear that we don't really have proper global health governance structures. We have something very good, that is the World Health Organization, who's played a crucial role, but it is missing more effective mechanisms for managing global health crises like the COVID-19. Like, for instance, international health research cooperation in terms of vaccine developments, rather than allow competition to go and let the market drive the research. Being a pandemic that will affect the whole of humanity, the less we will expect is for this to be a collaborative effort in which people can share developments. Yeah, in terms of global health equity, yeah, this relationship between governments and pharmaceutics, for instance, the possibility of sharing vaccine costs and distribution, and creating a more egalitarian distribution and access to vaccines to people in the planet, will be an ideal in an egalitarian society. That we are far away from that, but it's not impossible to do, and we have an opportunity to try to go in that direction. Yeah. So things like action learning, cooperation to better chain main lessons and distribute learning. Yeah, this will be ideal. Restructuring the global markets. If we could foster endogenous development to ensure, for instance, food and health security. In this moment, we need to assure that people are not going to die because they are hungry. We haven't done the research of how many people are dying now because they are hungry rather than because of the COVID. So, I mean, one crisis generates the other one, but at that level, a global effort to try to combat food poverty and food security and health security will be important. Issues that have emerged as possibilities, like universal income to fight poverty. Yeah, it's the right moment to start discussing these kind of issues. So the surviving lessons, businesses and the ones that have collapsed. Enormous amounts of lessons to be learned in terms of how the crisis has restructured the industry and the market. Yeah, and I mean, the idea of developing more local development strategies, with no doubt the most desirable scenario for sustainability in the long term is empowering local communities, local businesses, to not to depend so much in global supplies, for instance. So a huge field for research at that level. So in terms, people are beginning to talk about the emergence of a post-COVID society, the idea of building back better, yeah? And it is clear that we have choices. At the individual level, we have choices. We have learned that we can consume less, travel less, share more with community and nature, and still have a good quality of life, no? At the level of nations, regions, and communities, no? There are lots of self-organized networks of agents developing basic survival services in health, in education, in food security, in energy and transport. Lots of green initiatives for sustainable development. Some governments, like a group of 40 of the major cities in the world, the majors are taking the lead and saying, we are going to invest a big chunk of our investment in creating a greener city, a more greener city, and generating enormous amount of employment for people to generate a greener society. Yeah. So again, new opportunities emerging for the crisis that we could pick up and develop. Yeah. And governments, if they had their heart in the right place, and if they were ethical governments, they have an opportunity to redesign taxes to support local innovation, entrepreneurship, universal basic income, COVID vaccines as a global common good. I mean, there are lots of new ideas that are in the air that people are pushing, and that really good leaders could push forward in this situation and make an enormous change. So in general, yeah, from as cyberneticians in this community, we have contributions to do, no? And we have a lot of opportunities to continue developing viability and sustainability approaches and tools. Yeah, as we said, all these examples show that the possibility of developing this self-transformation, supporting and coaching self-transformation at all levels are there. Yeah, supporting individuals, organizations, networks, and governments to improve sustainable self-governance. No, in terms of tools, I mean, we have the opportunity to develop the tools that Stafford did, like the recent project we did with some of you, the eSyn, generating an electronic version of disintegration. In the recent experiment in January this year, we tried to respond to this question: how can Metaphorum and its members capture the learning from the current crisis and best contribute in radical shifts that society have to make fast? And it was a fascinating experience. It did work technologically and humanly. And we really have a lot of learning and really interesting efforts. And some of us have continued developing the ideas from the eSyn, and there are new projects emerging in the community. Yeah. So in general, I mean, we have the opportunity, even with these online tools, to continue becoming an online action learning community, to share the experience, to share and that's basically the purpose of these webinars, to sort of get together and see what are we learning, how can we cooperate to share our learning, how can we influence policy and strategy globally and locally. So to conclude this webinar, this is an idea from Chopra that talks about the caterpillar becoming a butterfly. And what it says is that the caterpillar has these so-called imaginative cells. They are different, resonate at different frequency. The immune system fails to destroy them, and they form a critical mass. And then they show the incredible birth of a butterfly. Margaret Mead used to say, a small group of motivated and determined citizens can change the world. And Mario Benedetti said, what if one day when we wake up, we realize that we are the majority? So groups of imaginative cells are emerging, recognizing themselves, raising awareness, organizing themselves, creating a new, more compassionate and just society everywhere in the planet. So my call maybe is me that I am naive and optimistic, even in the middle of these tragedies. It's just let's become imaginative selves. Let's connect. Let's get together and let's build an alliance for a new society. We have the tools to make it happen quicker and more effectively. So thank you very much. This is it.
Thank you very much, Angela. One or two issues there.
Okay.
Covered a
Yep.
huge amount of ground. Who would like to start off with a question or a comment? Javier.
Yes, I wrote several notes. First, the very importance of what Angela just told us is, number one, we have to have a shared model of our reality. As long as people don't have the cybernetic view of organizations, it is very difficult. We keep investing on organizations that are bankrupt, that are sick, okay, that are bureaucratic. And bureaucratic solutions brings a whole a big bunch of disasters, okay? I don't know if you've seen this experience, but Cheran is a town in Mexico, a small municipality that broke away from the, let's say, constitutional system, and they started their own self-organization, and they got rid of crime. They have 10 years, no crime, no extortions, no narco trafficking, no rapes, robberies, or anything. Zero in the whole town. Okay, the jails are empty. Okay, everybody has a job. Okay, I don't like the idea of universal income not coming from a big bureaucracy at national level is a disaster. Okay, it's not just that I'm conservative. No, it doesn't work. What works is taking care of a community and let Cheran take care of its own people, and everybody will have a job. Okay, I don't believe in free lunches because they don't work. Okay, it's like the easy solution that doesn't work. Now, I have been developing a software that would work perfectly in developing communities. I won't talk much about it. I'll probably give you a talk later, some other time. Okay. And the other thing is the problem of freedom. Okay. It is very clear to me that some countries have risked and even pay in debts for not having their freedoms, their personal freedoms being at risk. Okay, they rather risk the dead. It's very clear. Okay, and maybe Cuba is an example of a community that you don't want to live in because they are controlling everything. Okay, but maybe New Zealand is the solution. Okay, but it's also an island. You cannot deny that the United States played a major role in getting the vaccine in months instead of years. And that was a cooperation between government and private industry, okay? That's the way it happened, okay? And nobody gives credit to that. Okay, fine. So I congratulate Angela for proposing that we produce something as a group, okay? Not individually, as a group. We have to come up with something to share with everybody signing on, okay? That's all my comments.
Okay, well, just in response to your comments, I agree with you. I mean, the best solution is to do as they have done in Shiran, and the fact that they managed to do it demonstrate that it is possible. This is far better than any top-down national policy. So I mean, completely agree with you. The example of universal income is just a political example. I personally like the idea, but I mean, this is not to discuss politics. It's more to discuss probable solutions that, let's say, are cybernetically sound in the middle of a big pandemic and a big crisis like this. But completely agree with you. I mean, it's not the only possibility. I do agree that the United States has been fantastic in terms of vaccination. So has it the United Kingdom. They may have been very bad in the beginning in dealing with the pandemic. They are demonstrating really huge effectiveness in this moment in terms of massive vaccination. So, I mean, nothing is black and white. No, both countries are fantastic and have amazing value in the way that they have done. The question that I just do it from the curiosity of a researcher, trying to look with cybernetic eyes if there are some issues that we can learn in terms of patterns of relationships that may be correlated with success and failure. But you are right. I mean, and I don't want to get political here because we all have the right to have differences in our in our politics. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you,
Okay.
Angela.
Okay.
Okay, another question, another comment. I can only see half the screen, so you might have to shout. No, nobody?
Yeah, I thank you, Angela. As always, it's great. Throughout the whole thing, I just keep finding myself wanting for us to have a shareable way to visualize what we're talking about. For me, everyone on this call understands more than the people in our neighborhoods can, because we have these fairly discrete mental models, and we've got to make those handy and visible for everyone at every scale. And so what I'd like to see us all work on is a way for people to represent the systems of interest in a viable system picture so that anyone could understand it, mothers and kids and presidents.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mark. I think that this is by far one of the most urgent things that we as a community need to do. I mean, we really need to decode the deep theory of the VSM and make it affordable for people that not necessarily need to go through a PhD to be able to understand the VSM. Yeah, so making it affordable by the common citizen, by the common people, by people in our families, by people in our neighborhoods is. I share that passion with you, and I agree that the only way that we are really going to have an impact is if we manage to create ways of visualizing and making understandable these theories so that lots of people can start using them in their personal and working lives. Yeah.
Okay, Kate, you got a question or a comment?
I got a compliment and a comment, I suppose I would say. So I think it's a really fabulous presentation and great stuff. I still don't have a copy of this book, and I'm reminded again that I have to address that because I have wanted to get a copy for quite some time. But I wanted to touch on this final point I mentioned a little bit in the chat, and I think it's interesting because Javier and I probably have very different positions, but nonetheless some points of agreement. So I think there's something going on in that ground, and this is the problem when you start talking, or when we start talking about global governance. And I think the failure of the WHO is a very good example of the problems we have with global governance. One of the things that fascinates me about complex systems in general, the VSM and other tools like this, is that it helps us to overcome the impossibility of being able to organize at the planetary level. And it liberates us from the need to think that we have to accomplish that. And so I think there's a lot to be done in respect to thinking about the way in which different types of emergence are generated by different configurations at the local level. How do things report out on the planetary level? Because obviously with things like this pandemic, we have to start addressing that. The pandemic is going to be with us for another 20 years because because of projects, whatever it is, one shot. I don't even remember what they called it in the US, because part of that getting the financing for the vaccines has been to set them up as commercial enterprises. Here in Colombia, they're already in the process of formalizing the right of private companies to buy and distribute vaccine to their employees. And that's just a microcosm of what we're going to see on a planetary level. So I think that we're in this dilemma of needing to address these global governance issues and knowing that that it doesn't get resolved by having a master plan at the planet level. So I think it's a very fertile area. I don't have much clearer thoughts about it at the moment, but I'm very excited about it. So thank you.
Thank you, Kate. I agree with you. For me as well. I mean, I had this passion to think about global governance for the last many years, and we've made very timid attempts to start going into the topic with John. But every time that you think about global governance, you start panicking and thinking, "Oh gosh, the complexity is so good, so big that are we going to be able to do anything about it?" Yeah. My experience and something that I learned from Stafford is that you only deal with complexity by simplicity in a way. So in order to deal with really, really complex problems, you need to focus. You need to focus in an aspect of the problem that you can deal with. Because that's the problem with complexity. When it's too complex, you can just not address everything at the same time. So to try to invent, for instance, a global governance system inspiring the VSM to control everything, I mean, far away from being able to, I mean, all the political issues and economic issues are too complex. But what we can do, my other learning with the Stafford was really things can change when there is a need for the system to be changed. It is the only possibility. When there is an urgency to go in a direction of change, then there is the the terrain is rich enough so that you can attempt some kind of changes. So at that level, I think that this topic, global health governance, is a topic in which we can, I mean, there is a fertile terrain in this moment, and we could together sort of address possibilities of doing something. And again, it's going to be partial. It's not that we're going to redesign the global health system. Forget about it. I mean, we still have enormous problems in each country, in each locality with the health systems. But at least some common agreements will be possible. No, and again, I mean, I think that we have tools to contribute. If anyone call us to collaborate, we may be able to to collaborate with some thinking. Yeah.
You've just reminded me that this was actually one of the things that came out of one of the groups I was in the East, and that using COVID as an empty signifier, as an ant object, to start talking about these issues of dignity. So I guess that's something we should try to maybe come back to. Thank you for your comment and for your lovely presentation.
Okay, who's next? John? You need to unmute, John.
Hi, Angela, thank you very much for your presentation. I really enjoyed it a lot. I think that sustainability is a summation of viability. The viability is short-term, long-term is sustainability. So you have cumulative viability, then you have sustainability, but it's got to be with coevolution within the context of the environment. Number two, half the people in the United States do not believe in evolution. Number three, on March the 11th, a year ago, we all became Buddhists. We all lost our sense of the future. The more people were involved in investment in the future, the more they had to stop what they were doing and start over. We all live day to day in the way that we've been living year to year for the last 50 years. So our sense of the future has changed a great deal. To me, Stafford's book, Heart of Enterprise, chapter on planning, is to focus on now as opposed to focusing on the future. What would be the best thing you could decide to do now based on what you know now? And we have all new information in the last year that we haven't paid any attention to. We're a lot more like indigenous people now than we were a year ago. Number 4, this is a book called Utopia. It was written in 1975. It exactly models the different levels that you were talking about, so that it integrates the personal, the community, the family, nature, and the larger society, and explains how they would function together. And it's ecological. It's how people could work together. And it's not science fiction, it's political fiction. Thanks for your talk.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much. I really like your point on the future, and I guess that is, I agree. I mean, the idea of future has completely changed for us. I mean, one of the issues of this pandemic is that none of us has a certain future, and this creates a really challenging challenge for all of us at all levels.
Okay, Stephen, you got a hand up.
Unmuted, finally. Okay, Angela, I really loved your chat, particularly the emphasis upon community. We know about the importance of community. The World Health Organization demonstrated the importance of community in handling Ebola. You know, I think how dangerous a disease can you have as Ebola, but it was the community that was important here. But if we start thinking about it, at whatever level you want to think about it, we'll look at local, regional, national, international. We've got a serious problem with politics. We've also got the contextual aspects of it. And you know, when we've got a dysfunctional system at the outset, such as rising homelessness because of the housing crisis, unaffordable rents, healthcare that's broken and a really long waiting lists and inability for people to be seen on time, a welfare support system where you've got people turning to prostitution and food banks, educational system where teachers are leaving by the droves, against a backdrop of local government where you've got political figures who are locked into their own way of thinking, elected because of the populist policies. Community doesn't stand a chance here. And I really am wondering exactly how can community have a voice, be heard, and engage and participate. I came across a lovely paper by Rittel, what was it, 1980, 81, when he was talking about the importance of the community and participation. But we're looking, what, 40 years later, and where are we with regard to this issue of community? Now, when I was talking about housing, healthcare, and all the rest of it, I'm not talking about an emerging economy. I'm talking about Scotland and Edinburgh particularly here, which might surprise you. So community, I think, is extremely important, but how can community overcome the political issues and the dysfunctional contextual issues of systems that are just totally not working?
Yeah, I agree with you, Stephen. The reality, the political reality of many communities is very difficult, and the economic reality of many people in communities is extremely challenging, and that doesn't help participation and democracy. Anyway, I'm still hopeful that things may change. And my hopes come from previous experience I had, mostly in Colombia and in Latin America, when I have seen that people, very poor people, can really become extremely collaborative and very participatory and democratic, again, when they are pushed by their own needs, when they are pushed by their own poverty, by the need to share, and if they have a culture that enhances or facilitates the sharing, possibilities of doing experiments that are positive regarding participatory democracy happen. We have here with us Alfredo del Valle, who is one of our next speakers. He's going to be talking to us about a really exciting experiment that he's doing in Chile regarding the new constitution using systemic and cybernetic ideas. Yeah, I have published before about my own experiences on participatory systems. And as I say, I know that it's not easy, but again, in situations when there is a lot of need and pain at the community level, collaboration is easier to emerge. I always remember John's mother, who had a lot of stories about the Second World War in England, and how in the local community, when they were in the middle of the war, she experienced more participation, more democracy, and more collaboration than ever before, ever again in her life. Yeah, it's sad to say, but in this situation in which there is so much pain, so much sorrow, and so much need, again, we have a more fertile environment in which people do want to collaborate, do need sharing, do need collaboration. And we have these platforms, the electronic platforms, that allow us to get communicated. So again, the possibility that we have is more creatively designing collaborative platforms, online platforms, and hopefully face-to-face as well in the future, no, to enhance and facilitate that participation. Gary Alexander also has a lot of experience with communities, facilitating communities. Mark Persson has really exciting tools, experiences facilitating communities and using also BSM and creating online platforms. So, I mean, there is a lot of richness in this community in terms of what can be done. So, I mean, at that level, I still continue to be optimistic that we can do things. It doesn't mean that it's easy at all.
Gary, did you have your hand up? Were you going to say something?
No, I was just waving. Thanks for mentioning me.
Okay. Okay. Who else?
Alfredo del Valle.
I was just doing the same as Gary. Thank you, Angela, for mentioning it.
Elena.
I wanted to make a comment about global governance being something that was only so far being successful piecemeal, like IATA governing air transport, but wondered if we couldn't push instead for a global, real-time, almost information system to keep track of emerging, climate crises, disease crises, economic crises, and that could possibly, through media that wasn't allied to an alternative reality, present enough countries or governments with the information they needed to act on their own at whatever level.
Yeah, I like very much your comment, Elena, and I think that we have both talked about this before, and I agree. I think that the possibility exists, and now that we have the technology, because when Stafford was alive, we didn't have the technology. In this moment, we do have the technology. The technology is there. We have all the mobile phones. We are completely communicating with each other, and we have massive information systems at the global level, monitoring climate change, now monitoring COVID. We have real-time information about the number of people that are getting infected, that are dying, and so on. So, I mean, the information systems exist. What we need is to create the tissue, the network, to make this information available, globally available, and to connect that with decision makers. So the challenge is much easier than it was 30 years ago when Stafford was alive, but we still have a huge challenge, because in order to get there, we need really resources, and we need international cooperation to make something like that. Now, again, some people in this community have been thinking about that. I'm aware, like, for instance, Peter and John and Barry Clemson and Hans-Peter, we've been meeting and talking about these kind of ideas of sustainable governance at the level of ecoregion, and talking a lot about generating indicators on essential variables for sustainability. This is like a dream that, I mean, the technology is there, but we really need to start with an experiment, yeah? and try to demonstrate that this is possible, and then create a process for educating and sharing with other people. So for me, I will be delighted if somebody comes with a possible experiment, with a feasible experiment to contribute in that level. That will be really exciting.
Yeah, John, you got a comment?
In Gregory Bateson's book, Steps to an Ecology of Mind, the last chapter is about doing that for New York City.
All right. Thank you, John.
Well, that's number one. Number two is in The Phenomena of Man, Teilhard de Chardin talked about the new sphere. That's what we're doing, is we're creating the collective consciousness around the planet to govern the dysfunctionality that has evolved from capitalism and the other political and economic systems that are now dysfunctional.
Yeah, just a comment from me. The thing that always comes to my mind when we're having these discussions is the Netherlands, because the Netherlands is made up of very, very fiercely autonomous regions who hate any sort of central coordination, except when it comes to water. And they have this central body who studies the water and the seas and the sea levels and the dikes and the windmills. And if they say, okay, guys, you've got to do this, everybody jumps. And it's classic autonomy, limits to autonomy because of system cohesion. Because if the whole country sinks, gets flooded, then there's no more Netherlands. So and it's a very, very interesting way that they defend their autonomy fiercely, but accept that there are ways that you have to work at a national level. And if you could do what Elena's suggesting and establish that principle for the global level for all the climate change issues, which are similarly threatening. I mean, maybe it's not so immediate, but I mean, the severity of the situation is becoming clearer every day. Maybe this is a chance of some sort of global governance, because I think if we use the model of governance, the authoritarian, super strong president, Donald Trump, Bolsonaro model, nobody wants somebody like that as the running the global governance systems. You need a completely different approach to it, which is why, once again, Stafford's work is so important. Okay. Anybody else?
Alfredo.
Yes, thank you. I think just a reflection I've been doing for some time. Authoritarianism, this centralization and things like that have to do a lot with something the feminists have reminded us about, which is patriarchy. I don't know if this is well pronounced in English, yeah. But I think this is the deepest cultural paradigm we have still around, yeah. And that is, as we know, a paradigm that comes back from maybe a few millennia, yeah, not just centuries. Yeah. And patriarchy obviously has to do with things like power, domination, war, and so on. I don't need to add any, yeah. And has to do with a type of politics that is widely spread all over, yeah, which is this kind of dominant top-down. All that is an expression of this cultural pattern. Yeah. And I think the type of regimes, political regimes we have now, yeah, have to do exactly with that. Yeah. And the inefficiencies of highly centralized, yeah, and of bureaucracies also. Yeah. Bureaucracy, why do they exist? Because somebody wants to control rather than to let people do. Yeah. And then invent this absurd and absolutely useless thing. My point I'm trying to say is this. I think we need not only women, yeah, in power, And the case of New Zealand that you mentioned, Angela, is clear. Everybody knows a woman is in charge there. Yeah, and other countries led by women also have fared quite well in this crisis. But I think the essential thing we need is a type of completely different type of governance, yeah, or completely different type of politics. Yeah, using the Chinese terms, yeah, we have a fully young, yeah, deeply young structure coming from patriarchy, and we need to move towards some kind of yin-yang cooperation, collaboration, integration. Yeah, I think that's the only really creative, as we know from nature. Yeah, in nature, creation of life comes from male and female together. Yeah. Now that we are not applying in society, we're deeply involved in this kind of macho type of society and politics and so on. Yeah. So one invitation I would like to do in terms of this experiment that Angela mentions, yeah, which I would like to participate. Maybe we could think together, yeah, about how to make this match, yeah, not only at the individual, but at the social level. Yeah, how could we? Basically what I would like to is half the population of the world are women. Yeah, and I think that's the possibility, the big possibility of changing this disaster. Yeah, this tragedy we have is there, is by having half of the population of the world more active. Yeah, and I think this kind of activity is not just of them, yeah, but is together. Yeah, I think one of the problems I have with some feminisms is precisely that they are against men. Yeah, and I think it's okay they are against patriarchy, but we have to invent the alternative to patriarchy. Yeah. I don't know how what it is. Yeah, but I think that's something we could think about with these cybernetic and related concepts. So that's just an invitation or a suggestion for us to keep going. And by the way, I see far more men than women here. I would like to see more women in this here.
Thank you, Alfredo. Thank you very much. We will come back to that when you are talking next time. Yep, very nice point.
Okay, well, it's nearly 6:30, so we're drawing to a close. Any other questions before we finish? Okay.
Jose Perez Rios have been raising his hand.
Oh, sorry.
And James, yeah.
Well, yes, a couple of observations. Angela, thanks very much for the presentation. It's quite interesting to see a presentation that covers all the recursion levels, going from the individual to the global government. My concern is that I'm a little pessimistic about the proposal of our dear friend Javier Livas of making a collective proposal to whom we would ask, to whom? To the society, to the world? Well, this is a big question, because we would need transducers to convey this knowledge to whom? The answer would be to the rulers, to the politicians that have the power to restructure the organizations at all levels. And there is where I find the problem, because how can we reach the big variety of politicians at different levels that they have to know all this wealth of knowledge, not only organizational cybernetics, by the way, that this would be fantastic for the structural complexity, but the other kinds of complexity, for example, the dynamic complexity that has been affected dramatically in the case of the COVID. The dynamic complexity, as you know, is related to the distance between the effect and the cause. We take decisions, and these decisions have an effect later, and also they have an effect later combined with other decisions that are acting, etc., etc. No? And this, the example in the COVID, we have it with the supply of, initially at least, of aids to protect the doctors, etc., etc. There were huge delays. Now we are having the materialization with the delays in the vaccines. We have to wait for the delays. And now there are some countries that are getting the vaccines, some other countries are not getting them yet, some others will get it maybe next year or who knows when, etc. This is dynamic complexity, etc. So we have so many complexity issues that the task is a little tremendous. No? Anyway, we have to do something. No? But the question would be, what are the transducers, and how can we reach those transducers and to place the knowledge that the group has in the heads of those transducers, because this at least will provide some hope that they may be better prepared to handle the situation and to talk with other politicians that should have also this knowledge. Because if this is not the case, the conversation is going to be quite difficult. So this is my summary. These three kinds of difficulty: dynamic complexity, structural complexity, and group decision-making complexity. These three together made the situation tremendous. Anyway, we have to keep the faith in moving on. No? We have to continue and doing what we can. But just to say that, no? Only that. Thank you, Angela.
Thank you, Jose. Undoubtedly, the complexity is enormous, and like you, I don't think that we can do a lot, but at least doing little experiments in which we can demonstrate innovative ways of dealing with every one of these aspects of complexity, well, it's the best that we can do. We are a small community. We cannot do too many experiments. We don't have a lot of time left. So at least we can just join energies and share the little learning that we are doing slightly. It's going to be up to several generations to really generate a systemic change. We won't do it ourselves. It's too much. It's too big. But at least a little start, slow paces will be good.
Okay, well, a final comment is a study that I suggest that you have a look to it. It's a research that has been published by Harvard, a group of Harvard researchers, and they talk about the fallacies, hard truths, and lessons learned from the global response to the COVID. And the tragedy of this, of their conclusions, is that the fallacies, some of the fallacies are quite worrying. For instance, just to mention a couple of things. In an emergency, politics takes a backseat to policy. One fallacy. The other fallacy is science advisors enable policymakers to choose the best policies. Wrong. Another fallacy, distrust in public health advice reflects scientific illiteracy. Wrong, etc. So there is a reflection that questions the role of the scientific groups to influence the politicians. And this makes even more difficult what we were commenting before, because if they don't care about this, because they are taking their decisions based on other goals, all this is even more difficult. So this is, well, I did not want to depress the group.
You did very well. Now we are all depressed. We are all depressed.
No, this is just to motivate us, to find some ways to come out of this problem. Thank you, Angela.
Thank you, Jose. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Everybody, thank you. Another 2 weeks. Who's next, Angela? Is it Alfredo in 2 weeks?
I'm not sure, Alfredo. Are you in 2 weeks? Alfredo's gone, I think.
He's gone. Okay. Well, anyway, we'll send out a notification.
It's either Alfredo or Elena. Elena, do you remember your date?
Are you muted?
You are muted. I think Elena is in 1 month, and Alfredo, is it due in 2 weeks?
I'm in a month.
Okay, so it's Alfredo and then Elena. Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, everybody. Well,
Can I
thank you
just
ever so
ask
much for
a question
attending. And
about
thank you,
that?
Angela, for the presentation.
Are you making available recordings? I was able to participate today because my students have an exam, so I can
Yeah,
kind of.
they're all recorded and they are
Yes.
being put on the website.
Yes, in the website you can find them. Yep. In the invitation, I put the link in the
Okay, super.
invitation. In the reminder, you will find the link to the website, and the recordings are there. Mhm. So anyway, thank you everyone for coming. It's been really interesting session, and hope to see you again in a couple of weeks. And just a reminder, if anyone here wants to suggest us a webinar or on a topic, on a new topic or recent research, please get in touch with me. I'm organizing the series, this webinar series for next semester. And as I said, Marcus Schoeninger will be starting them. We still have a few places left, so please get in touch. Okay.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Mhm.
Bye,
Thank you
everybody.
very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, bye bye. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Thank you.
Chao, Ángela, gracias.
De nada, gracias.
Bye. Chào Angela.
Bye bye.
Thanks, Angela. Bye-bye.
Mhm.
I'll speak to you soon.
Okay, thank you.